We're back in Embiggening Babylon for part 2 of the Babylon campaign complete commentary. That in reality is mostly me venting various thoughts on the game in general. This game being Total War Pharaoh Dynasties. I do like my 3 title games here on the OFFD Game Grounds channel. With me, your host, the man who puts the host in hostage situation, OFFD. Now I am in a sort of hostage situation in the game because one of the random factions I've been blithely exterminating had some surviving troops somewhere that were able to conquer one of my neighbours up the river. And then they sent ships to attack me. If you were looking very closely at the end of the last part, I made non-aggression pacts with the guys to my west and disbanded all my armies over there to focus entirely on going east. So now I'm in trouble, but I had learned in the last part to give peace a chance. And indeed I find that for a modest bribe, I can peace out with that faction. We'll be back to kill you later, I say with a wave and a cheery smile, because such is the charismatic malice of the King of the Universe, and that brings me to my next topic of discussion for this barely disguised podcast, the court system. I have been promoted to the actual King of the Universe. But enough about me, back to the game, and so on. Last time I vassalized the previous King of the Universe, and it seems that somewhere along the way I managed to get his job, actually losing the title of King of Babylon, and I'm being asked to give Babylon to someone else now. And while I make that decision, let's rant. This is the court screen, surprisingly the most important of the campaign bells and whistles, in that you need to use this every single turn. Meaning, in terms of what you do in the game, it's like in 3rd or 4th place, like you've got making buildings as like the main thing you spend your turn doing, then you move your armies, maybe there's diplomacy as well, and then doing the court stuff is the other thing you have to do each turn. It's a big deal, or it wants to be a big deal. Last time I mentioned how the court system is very disconnected from the rest of the game's mechanics, and that's the big problem here essentially. This is the case with all of the things I'm facetiously calling bells and whistles. It's very stark in the case of the court system though, because the court system is fighting directly against what you're doing in the game. The thing to clear up right away is that this court isn't a court within our faction, it's a court that our faction is part of. It's like a coalition or an alliance between many factions, and we go to it, we go to the NATO summit to talk about stuff. And you have to do something each turn. Well, you don't actually have to do something each turn. The game tells you to do something each turn, to take a court action, to use the game's parlance. There are many different kinds of action with many different effects, with the options available being based on how much the other kings like you and their specific roles in the court versus yours. It's got a decent amount of detail, and like many of the bells and whistles, it's a really great implementation of the idea. I just don't like the idea. And I think that might be because it has no introduction or context. The big question is, what does it mean? What does it mean for me to be promoted to King of the Universe? More specifically, why does nothing happen when I do this? Like, why isn't this part of the game? I expect mechanical changes here. I expect to be able to control the other factions because I became their king. Like, is that not what's happening? Like, what does this mean in the game? As it stands, the answer is nothing, but what is it supposed to mean? That's what I'm rhetorically asking. It needs to be a focus of the game, this court system, or it needs to not be here. That's how it gets promoted from bell and or whistle to real gameplay feature. But the game just isn't about the court system. They've added it on top of the Total War gameplay, without any ability to interrupt or interact with that Total War gameplay, and it might even be bad had they given it that ability. Meaning, my fellow kings and vassals in the court are just the other nameless people I kill out there. Like, once we close the court screen, we go back to them being my enemy. And there's no connection there between the 2 different strands of the game. Something doesn't add up here. Like, can we at least talk about it or something? I don't know. I should mention my court strategy was to simply repeat the same thing every turn. I would go in and pick a random court member and choose Gossip as my action with them, which builds a trust stat. Then you can spend trust to get Kuduru through a different court action, Kuduru being that semi-hidden currency you can use to buy endgame techs with. And that's all I did every turn. If you try to end a turn without doing this, it tells you to stop and go and do it first. It's a very front and center mechanic. I was just too jaded to get much out of it. I got all the Kuduru I could, And I think that's a fairly good choice because the bonuses you get from endgame techs are better than the passives you get if you spend your trust on other things, I think. You can get discounted units sometimes, which I forget. I remember seeing something useful in there as well. You can also assassinate people, you can blackmail people, you can play politics, with the idea being you need to reduce the legitimacy of the other courtiers while raising your own to gain and hold the King of the Universe position. And when I say you need to do this, what I mean is it would be nice if you needed to do this, because not only does becoming King of the Universe not bring you any content for the gameplay, like there are no mechanics associated with it, but I didn't do any politics at all, and I still became King of the Universe at the start of the game, because you can generate legitimacy with buildings and battle victories. And yes, making buildings and fighting battles is the actual game. So you end up on top of the politics system. Just anyway, you will just have more building slots than the AI, you'll fight more battles than the AI, so you're going to win this contest. As for fixing that, I think it's a very dangerous game to get into, because if you start pulling Total War Attila antics to make the politics matter and try to integrate it a bit more, those antics will turn out to be, based on past form, raining punishments and debuffs on the player, having the AI assassinate your characters, like giving you money pits to work on, just bringing you down as stuff happens to interrupt the game, so that you can go and pay lip service to the politics mechanic, and then you go back to the real game because the politics mechanics don't contribute to the game state. You can't win in there. It's not part of the game in the purest sense. That would be bad were that to happen here, so I think what we've got here is better than previous attempts once again. My answer, I guess, is to be willing to let the court system change the game mechanically, possibly radically. You don't even need to be an independent faction, like in my view of this. If I'm not in a king position, I don't control a faction, like completely break the Total War formula. Just give me one army in another faction until I have the legitimacy to control a territory. Once again, we are reinventing Mount and Blade, aren't we? But you know, that's an excuse to have a court and legitimacy building mechanic be integrated into the game's progression, and be meaningful and be fun even. Overall, the court system is a mechanic, I guess. It rings a little bell at you once per turn, you gotta go and do what it wants, but if you're playing the game in an ordinary fashion, you will absolutely crush all of your court gameplay without a second thought. You don't need to do it to win or progress. It doesn't pass the "would the game be different if we deleted this entirely" mechanical test, which is an accusation at the core of my bells and whistles classification. I did later on try to engage with the court system a bit, I think, and I was able to make my son the king of Babylon, so we held two positions at once. It seems like a good move, but I guess it isn't, in that nobody cares. The game doesn't care, that's for sure. But if somebody cared, I wouldn't be talking about it. You're watching Offie D's Game Grounds. All that very much and very pointedly aside, I've been conquering whoever these guys are in the bottom right corner of the map. Due to some questionable army positioning from our enemy, we were able to take both their settlements for free, including one of the most famous cities from the good old days, might even be the earliest of the Mesopotamian city-states, I forget now. Most importantly, it comes with a building you can place here, the House of Ir-Nasir, the legendary Bronze Age meme man from the internet, the OG dropshipping scammer. I'm very disturbed right now because my real-life neighbour, whose name I won't learn before I kill them, is getting their roof redone, and it's very loud, so sorry about that. Anyway, we'll make Ir-Nasir's house. Maybe something good will happen. We've now got a very secure border with our long southern edge and eastern edge. Pretty much attack-proof, although not really, as we'll see later. We can now proceed up the east edge of the map towards the not-too-distant northern edge. Because we're in this little wedge, separate from the main map, it's going to be easy for us to take lots of very safe edge territories. We're going to be going for edge control. Edge control is always a good idea, and I am truly the master of edge control, and so on. You might have seen the sheer aggression in my playstyle there, where I used my weaker army to take since that cost all of their movement, so that my stronger army could move out in the same turn and sail north via the bit of the sea you could access there, and just go for the next territory immediately. That's despite the enemy armies still being very much alive standing next to us, so we're just going to see what they do. It's time for another zero defense gambit. One of them sails upriver, one of them sticks around. Not too bad, as them taking back immediately before our garrison units could spawn would be the main risk and the best play for them. Probably the AI wouldn't think to do that though, because the balance bar when you start a siege is really one-sided in the defender's favour until you make siege equipment. So if the AI was trying to smell whether it could take the city, it might look like, because it's a walled city, they had no chance of taking it. Well, they blew it, although they do have 2 armies wandering about in my core territories. We're gonna gamble this won't end up being a problem. While our men at go out and destroy the army that was left behind, that's a good start. I might as well make something of this gambit now by attacking Lagash to the north with our main force, and that goes fine. There's a real I can conquer new territory faster than I'll lose my old territory doctrine being used here, I think, which isn't the best idea in this game because a settlement de-levels when it changes hands, meaning if you lose and retake territory, it will de-level twice. And most settlements only have 3 levels. In other words, you can give up a max rank settlement with all its max rank buildings, but it will be min rank when you get it back and the buildings will be gone. You'll have to rebuy everything and all the upgrades. So yes, you will be punished for playing very fast and loose. We're going to do it anyway. Maybe it won't come to that. It's time to see if we can defend one of our interior settlements against the forces. It's none other than a full stack of farmers once again, and this time I'm going to have to try defending all of our capture points to avoid the timeout thing discussed in the previous part. But numbers will be a problem to cover all the approaches. We're going to need to win some of these frontal battles. It's a dodgy situation with single units holding off 4 to 5 farmer units simultaneously sometimes. We've got some archers firing in for support, which will be good against the unshielded farmers, but well, we basically commit to that and just have to see what happens now. It's basically down to the invisible calculations on the battlefield. We're out of options as a player. My one free hand was this general's bodyguard I had come in as reinforcements. This happens if you have a certain kind of outpost in the region. We'll talk about outposts later. But even a general does struggle to take down a farmer unit quickly. So a single farmer squad kept those reinforcements out of the battle for most of its runtime, as it turns out. What we'll see is that eventually 1 or 2 of my units will die, and then the floodgates of farmers will be opened on the town interior, leading to us losing one of the 2 capture points, and the battle will all be downhill from there. We can't take out the farmers easily enough for this to work out, unfortunately. Felt like maybe we would be able to. As mentioned, this is probably because of difficulty level and because of breakpoints, as I put it in the past. I think I'm actually going to explain what I meant by that now, just to waste your time. A unit gets morale debuffs in quantized steps as it takes casualties. Welcome to the quantum physics of Euphrates River Delta farm labour with Professor Offidi. It's quantized, quote-unquote, meaning that the extent to which your morale goes down from taking losses isn't continuous. That's the opposite of quantized. It's like you take a morale hit after you take 10% losses, and then you don't take another one until you get 25% losses, then it's 50, then 75, just example numbers here. Morale is stepping downwards in chunks. Then there is some threshold where a unit will rout and lose a fight. You can perhaps see the problem here. A morale buff that puts you 1 point above the threshold for routing means it will now fight until the next morale reducing step in combat is reached. It gets that extra longevity, and that's what I was calling a breakpoint. Like you get a distinctive change in behavior with only a very small change in stats. So with my hypothetical numbers, a unit that might rout at 25% casualties gets plus 1 out of 100 morale and then requires 50% casualties, so it does way better with a tiny buff because that's just how long it takes to get to the next morale debuffing step in combat. Even if, like, a 50% casualty tolerance would usually be reserved for units with double or triple the upkeep of your trash farmers. That's part of their magic, but then there's also this compounding effect where, well, I'm not sure about this one. In battles, casualty rates as fights go on, I think, slow down over time, meaning if I needed to go from killing 25% of a farmer unit to killing 50% of it, for example, it's double the kills needed, but it takes more than double the time, and time is the key factor here, because melee attack stats decline with stamina, which just declines when you do anything. How exactly that works is very unknown, so this is very much speculation, but there is the possibility that getting to the next morale step takes longer than you'd think, further slowing down the process of routing a trash unit via casualties, when difficulty-based cheating is taking place. So with speed being of the essence, while we were trading well against the farmers, we were killing like 50 of them for every 5 we lost, they passed a breakpoint where they could survive long enough and hard enough to jump up a whole tier in performance. And there were loads of them, perhaps that's the more important and less insane thing to point out here. They just had numbers on their side, so they win, okay. A real and slightly less insane thing to note, actually, is how it sucks to have a battle like this, a last stand, or how much it shouldn't suck, really. It would be really good if me playing that battle and inflicting loads of damage on the enemy as we lost actually meant something. This is a big recurring issue in Total War. Because the farmers infinitely regenerate, killing a load of them doesn't do anything in this case, meaning I shouldn't have bothered playing the game here. I should have auto-resolved the loss and moved on. Again, I'm invoking all of the infinites and the impermanence of everything as a source of the unepic feel. There is no epic last stand because all defeats are equal. If you lost, you might as well have not bothered, even if you killed 90% of them. Like, they'll be back before any consequence of them taking losses might resolve, usually anyway, and that sucks big time. You know, I do love the replenishment system to some extent. Like, I love how simple and brain dead it makes things, and I'm saying that facetiously, but I actually mean it. I like being brain dead when it comes to the logistics and just not worrying about it. And I think other people like it as well. I think that's the reason they've gone down this path. It's a good mechanic in a way. It makes sense as a way to simplify the economy and logistics side of things. If you agree that simplifying that is a good idea, like that's the axiom there. However, I am obliged to point the finger at it for making things so casual that all of these battles just become infinitely regenerating number comparisons at the strategic level. Even just stepping in and saying, okay, replenishment should take 5 times as long. That might solve this problem, like, very quickly. That might be the answer. The other classic answer would be to have to pay money to replenish the army under appropriate circumstances. That's what I want. Lots of video games make you pay to heal at the inn, for example. Like, it's a familiar enough concept, isn't it? Empire Total War did this. And Empire Total War is the opposite to Total War Pharaoh, in that Pharaoh is an amazing implementation of a broken game. Empire is a broken implementation of an amazing game. So much was lost to us in those days. We didn't know what we had until it was gone. We shouldn't have complained so hard about it. Was Empire the last time Total War was exciting and innovative? Well, perhaps. Anyway, my response to all of this will be to make a new army at Babylon nearby and strengthen the army at Ur to come over later. We'll probably deal with that and kill them eventually, just like last time. Their other army, by the way, tried and failed to attack Babylon, which sucks because of an ultra niche and stupid Total War gameplay consideration that I will now burden you with. Siege penalties are applied for all factions at the start of the player's turn. That means if the AI sieges you with an insignificant force that can't do anything, you'll lose a turn of income and receive a turn of damage to the region's buildings before you get to click the Sally button and undo their joking siege, and you still take all the damage by then. However, you can't do something similar to the AI. Their turn will happen before siege penalties are applied if you besiege them during your turn, because only at the start of your next turn will the penalty be applied. They'll get the chance to sally first. And there you have it, the AI has a small advantage there. It's a really annoying and niche situation. It's been like that for a very long time. Nobody cares, but as mentioned, we lucky few here today are disciples of rarely relevant and universally ignored gameplay considerations. And yeah, it happened back there. I lost some money because of it probably. I don't like it, but I don't make the rules, despite being king of the universe. Time to kill the next guy, and there's a little example of that terrible balance bar you get when you start a siege at first, and I wonder if the AI can see that and yes, thinks that going for a siege is a bad idea because of that sometimes. I don't know, I guess the game wouldn't work if that was the case, so it must have something to override that consideration. We will have to slow down here by waiting an inglorious 1 turn to make a ram, then we can auto-resolve Nipper there. At least elsewhere we can auto-resolve some of the rogue forces with the guys I've been recruiting back in the core. A turn later at Nipper, we've got that 51-49 balance bar going on, meaning I can take the place for free, but only just. This is where the sheer determinism of the warfare gets a little silly. You can see how much damage you'll take in advance, and in particular you can see if you will lose any units, and only unit losses matter So since I don't lose anything, I can take this place quote-unquote for free, as I put it, because while I'll need to heal afterwards, you pay the same amount whether you need to heal or not. And I have spec'd entirely into healing, so I heal fast, plus you heal faster in settlements than in the field, meaning that I don't mind losing half my army, because I can make 1/3 of my army per turn for free. And that's a shame, because I think if I actually did that walled settlement assault, not only might it have been a fun new aspect to the game to explore, like leaving gameplay aside, I know my casualties would not have been perfectly distributed between many units for optimal healing, and that latter point is why it's a quote-unquote wrong move to play the battle in a case like this, because even if you take fewer casualties, what you actually need for replenishment purposes is to minimize the casualties taken on the unit that takes the most casualties, because minimizing that minimizes total healing time. As in, if you take 50% casualties across the army, that's 2 turns to heal, but if you take 25% casualties, but a couple of individual units were down 75%, because you assaulted the walls with them, for example, then you have to wait for a 75% heal to go through to get back to full, which might take 3 or 4 turns, and since all units heal equally, no matter how many units need healing, and it's all for free, it just makes auto-resolving stupidly good, basically. The way it equalizes casualties between units. It's not just good, it's perfect for keeping your momentum up. You always want to auto-resolve if you plan on attacking anything soon. The only case where this doesn't apply is if you think you're going to have to defend the thing you just took, like right away, before replenishment will happen. That's when controlling casualties manually will matter. It's just that that's extremely rare, like it hasn't happened so far, and more to the point, it shouldn't be the case that this is the only time manual fighting is better. I don't know, it's a difficult situation game design-wise again, because I want fewer battles, as I said, and the fact I can auto-resolve all of these nameless factions is the only thing keeping me playing. I wouldn't want to very slowly kill them and just get to the same result anyway. So it's good in that regard, but it also feels very wrong. I can only refer back to my previous demands for sweeping changes really and move on. You probably saw me auto-resolving the problem away as well, so we've dealt with that, freeing up a load more units to get back to making progress, and that was just in time, because we end up with the opportunity to go to war with some random guys to the west, thanks to our useless and weak-looking Assyrian vassals. So we'll get in on that and try to keep Assyria alive as a sort of pet. Meanwhile, the main forces are pressing on to the west, and I thought I would mention one more thing about auto-resolving, which is that while I'm claiming it distributes casualties perfectly, there is one caveat: it doesn't do this for cavalry. This is a long-running Total War issue/feature, where cavalry are treated differently in auto-resolves in one way or another. The classic problem, going back all the way I think to Empire Total War where it was really bad, is that cavalry units take far higher casualties in auto-resolve, even in hugely one-sided battles. As in, you could fight 100 guys and lose 2,000 cavalry, because cavalry auto-resolving is weird. Weird stuff like that was going on. It's not that bad now, but it's still happening. There was a brief interim during the Total War Attila days, where you could specify that you want to auto-resolve carefully, which supposedly weighed against cavalry less, so that was something you could do about this. We're back now to one-size-fits-all auto-resolving, and it tends to roughly double or triple the damage to cavalry in this campaign. That's my anecdotal experience. Meaning that if you take 30% losses in a battle, it's going to kill most of the cavalry units, and then like 28% of your infantry, something like that. I did recruit cav quite often, but you might see my armies don't have any because they die off in auto-resolves a lot. It's not even that obvious because cavalry usually goes at the end of the army's UI, which is sometimes below the fold in the auto-resolve results, so you might not see them dying or notice them being in the army at all. Well, something was going on there. I have questions, and I don't have cav. That's the situation. I think auto-resolving is another of these things that needs another anti-formula look. I think most likely what is needed is to have a little bit of player involvement in the auto-resolve. Like, it could be a 3-step process where you make a couple of decisions that will affect what units are taking losses on each side and the overall result as well. Maybe a tiny minigame of sorts that pops up to do, I don't know, a little puzzle. Something less robotic and mechanical, something less unimmersive, and something that would make me less jaded. I guess that's what I really want. Or even better than all of this, make the battles rare, epic, and cool enough that no one in their right mind would ever want to auto-resolve. We could go back to focusing on the selling point of the franchise. I think that's probably the best option. Well, it's also the hardest option, isn't it? As in, all these random, unguarded towns should just submit to me, because I'm here. I'm the king of the universe. Like, I don't want to have to fight over them and have to be answering these questions about whether I should have to do an inconsequential fight and just get the same result of the auto-resolve, things like that. I think there should just be like a single army gathering somewhere for a showdown to decide our war up here. Or because our neighbours can see us being really imperialistic, they're forming a coalition army against us and there'll be one dramatic battle coming up soon. That sort of thing. I don't know, like, this is a very big ask, whatever I'm asking for here. I'm asking for something different. I think that's the key thing to take away. It doesn't even really matter what specifically it is at this stage. Like, I'm just too downtrodden. You know what? It is a little bit like what I wanted, actually, because the guys I've been killing recently do appear with a surprise army in the east. It's a stack of trash dragging themselves out of the sea. No idea where that army was before, or what it could have possibly been doing over there. But yes, this is the era of the sea peoples after all, only it wasn't supposed to be these guys. I am going to lose Lagash here. I even start undoing build orders to save money, having no faith in me holding it. I will send the main force back there to retake it at some point, and that will probably work out, and that'll be the end of that. Same as the other couple of times this has happened. In the meantime, here's a little look at the so-called Elamite invaders. I believe the invader-type factions are the ones that spawn at map edges. I mentioned in the first part that map edges aren't actually safe, and this is why. Raider factions will spawn units on your borders to come in and cause trouble, in a nice nod to the fact that while the map has an edge, it doesn't actually, like, there is a wider world in the game world, a nice feature to add, even though it's annoying. But in this case, the Elamite invaders didn't come in as my enemies. They are neutral, meaning their so-called invasion turned into them walking around doing nothing for a while. I wondered if this was a bug, or whether there is actually something you can do to make invader factions non-hostile, and I've accidentally done it. I mean, I'm not totally sure, but I think Elamite culture is part of the Mesopotamian Council, like our NATO thing, of which my faction is the leader and my guy is the king of the universe of that thing. So maybe it's because of that. Could it be that if the Elamite king is my vassal technically, but not mechanically, then Elamite-flavoured bandit units don't attack us? Something like that could explain it. The end of their story off-screen somewhere was that some random faction, as I recall, came up from like all the way at the other end of the Euphrates River, sailed all the way down, killed the Elamite invaders while they were just standing around doing nothing, and then sailed back, and that was the end of that. So I guess they were automatically at war with somebody far away, and I also guess the AI has cheating map vision to know who's standing around in like the very corner of the map in my extreme core, but that's okay. I'm not mad about the AI having no fog of war on the campaign map, because I can see how programming the AI would be much easier if they just had full knowledge of everything. Like programming the logic for the AI guessing what's in the fog of war and trying to use meta knowledge and stuff, it's just not worth going down that route. It will fail. So I am fine with the AI cheating in this way on the campaign map. However, I believe the AI also cheats like this on the battle map. That's where I'm a bit more mad. I remember when I played Total War Pharaoh original version, there were cases where it seemed heavily implied the AI can see your hidden units even if they're hidden from the start of the battle and will deliberately go after them. And that's what I don't like, because it's just sort of removing a game mechanic in that case. I did manage to hide those farmers in a battle in the first part, so maybe it works better in Dynasties, or maybe that was a coincidence. Maybe my 2 data points aren't enough to make a conclusion. Well, that's not going to stop me. I'm on the internet, and you're watching Ovidi's Game Grounds channel, the home of sheer speculation, delivered just for the sake of hearing my own voice. Well, let's see what I'm going to use my own voice to say next. We've got a turn-up for the books incoming. First, my second main force, my second real army, as I think about it, is going off north to attack some more random people. That's all fine. We used the diplomacy trick there to get that war without any hassle, and progress continues. But the main thing is that my main army under the king arrives at Lagash to find an actual battle, so let's do it. I've even finished reforming the king's army to be actually good, with a nice selection of chosen unit types as well. I've got an army that I want and feel like I made to some extent here. It's more like it. The only thing we're missing is that Lagash doesn't matter, I guess. Like, this is once again a case of me re-killing a faction that had lost all its land and then made a comeback by dragging themselves out of the water like the holy salamander of back progress. So I guess it's less epic than it should be, but it's something. I liked this battle we've got here. It begins with a classic one unit on its own situation the AI likes to do. So we have to surround and pound a few guys on the edge of town, and then we play Total War Pharaoh Dynasties, blah blah blah, and now, only 1.5 hours into my commentary, I'm gonna do it. Let's commentate on some gameplay. How did it take this long to get something going? I spotted some exposed archers at one of the approaches to the town, and went in with some cav to see what happens. This is a very AI move, isn't it, to attack with a single unit of cav on its own. The difference is that after the enemy react, I withdraw immediately. The AI would probably commit to the fight in this case. I'm basically planning on attacking in several places and finding a way in that works. And things go better than expected, because after I stirred things up with that attack, the enemy start repositioning all over the place, in response to the prodding presumably, and they weakened their defences against my bigger attack group. We've got some kind of tactics, some kind of strategy, some kind of play going on here. Don't know how you pronounce that word. I also pulled out an extremely dangerous tactic that I used to rely on in the Total War Attila days. This is sending a unit forward to absorb all of the enemy's ammunition. The problem being that I'm using our faction leader to do this, and that questionable choice was because he's got a unique ability to form a shield wall. This gives extra resistance to ranged attacks, which combined with deflecting missiles for having a shield in the first place, and having a load of armor, it just means our King of the Universe is an excellent cannon fodder unit. I also sent in the cav again, but some jank cancels their charge this time, and outside of a charge, the cav aren't that good. So basically, they're dead now. I was complaining about Autoresolve killing off the cav, and here I am, dutifully just doing that myself also. It probably wasn't worth it either, because we didn't make much progress with those charges overall. I think I just wasted that cav unit. Would have been more useful to have later once we were inside the town. Anyway, the big attack happens. I went in on two sides of the town, and curiously the enemy came out on the third side, sallying against the area where my king was, which might be a good move if they weren't risking losing the capture points, and like that would screw them over in the long run. But yes, good to see proactive moves at the very least. There were issues in older Total Wars where a defending AI wasn't allowed to leave the settlement and couldn't do good moves like this, which could lead to many exploits and silly looking behaviours, so good to see basically that it's not happening right here. This turned into another nice battle with lots for me to do, loads of opportunities, and most importantly, free unengaged units to play with all over the place, like just stuff to do. Fighting on three fronts was pretty cool. The enemy have so many ranged units that it's not that bad to micro, because really, we're just running at them in many cases and that will work. So yes, this attack is bound to succeed. And the good news is that I didn't lose our king earlier. The game might be doing this secret move where officers can't die based on their rank, which I know Shogun 2 did, but I'm unsure if the mechanic is prevalent in the other Total War games. The idea was that the higher the level of a commander, the more of their bodyguards have to die before the commander is allowed to die, no matter the damage taken, like the damage is reflected onto other members of the unit up to a certain point. It was most notable in Fall of the Samurai, where if you had a high-level general and he took an artillery shell to the face, just guys nearby would die instead because of this magical protection. Maybe my wild plan would have failed if the devs weren't being kind to me, or kind to the named characters, which I think is a good idea, like having this little hack, by the way, because you don't have very much control over the details of combat. And it's safe to say that you don't want to lose named characters. It would feel frustrating to lose them, essentially, because you can't tell your men to act in such a way that it doesn't happen, but you should be able to. So I think it's fine to fudge the simulation and just say the unit always keeps their commander alive as long as possible. Higher level units do it for longer. Like, even if, like, in terms of what you actually see, the commander's model on the field is standing right at the front the whole time and doesn't carry a shield while arrows are raining down on everybody, well, somehow it worked out. This is a cautionary tale. Don't use your faction leader to absorb arrows from the enemy's army. but it worked for me, so no, maybe do if you want to. We win many small fights across the field, and we start swarming all over the town. Everything's going to fall apart for the enemy, and we will win. That was a very nice battle. So don't say I always complain, eh? That is good gameplay. That's what I'm looking for. The only thing holding it back is, well, what I mentioned before, that we're fighting over some random location against a random enemy who I thought was dead already, and it all feels like I was just reversing back progress rather than really doing anything. I don't know what I'm asking for here, but I think I might be unironically asking for the AI to just keep its armies close to its settlements and then only contest me, like when I first show up and then not again later. Can we just like decide everything with one big battle? That's what I keep coming back to for some reason. I want to fight them. Like, we decide the issue, and then everything falls into place one way or the other afterwards. This feels like it might bring out more battle gameplay by having those fewer, more important battles I keep referring to, and also be more kind of historical fiction feeling, by which I mean it would have the authenticity of single battles, massively shifting alliances, and alliances themselves being very loose in history. But we also manage to avoid the authenticity that we don't want, such as the authenticity of a battle just being two sides looking at each other for several days. One side moves onto a hill, the other side gets malaria and dies, and then there's an eventless 7-year siege of a hill fort, during which everyone gets malaria and dies, and then it doesn't rain for a while and all the belligerents to the war die, and eventually some guy just shows up, claims to be king of the universe, and says he ruled all of these territories all along and those other guys never existed, and no one can really prove otherwise, and there you have it, an empire is formed. That said, I'm not entirely against that either, but I guess it wouldn't be very good gameplay. Now, my lesser armies have sailed to the western end of our territory to war with the guys our vassals wanted to kill, and while that goes on, I wanted to do a rant on leveling up. I don't really have much footage of leveling up, but I'm sure there's a clip around here somewhere in this point in the campaign. Basically, the gist is, you get EXP for doing stuff, and if you level up, you can spend a skill point. The central problem I have with this is that there are only 3 things you can spend the points on, 3 skill lines, and they are the same for every character. Plus, there is a correct answer to the skill distribution question, IMO, leading to me putting the same build on every character. I can't remember now, but I think Total War 3 Kingdoms did something a little better, where different types of character were able to level up different types of skills. And it feels like Total War Pharaoh kind of wanted to do this as well, because the generals are labelled as being of particular archetypes, like Champion or Vanguard, like the usual video game names for things. I don't honestly know what those archetypes do in the game, but what they should do, I claim, is change what kind of skills the generals can get when leveling up. As it stands, you can either level up upkeep cost reduction, replenishment rate, or movement range. That first one is a massive trap, because the cost reduction you get is tiny compared to how much money the other two will make/save you. And of course, taking replenishment and movement range increases your progress through the game. Like, that's what you're supposed to do, that's the quote-unquote correct choice, because it reduces the number of turns between battles. And saving even like 1 turn in 5 not only saves you more upkeep than all of the upkeep reduction buffs can manage, but it makes you more money as well, because winning battles gives you money, which you can spend on things that make money. Positive feedback loop, positive feedback loop, positive feedback loop. I was rather thinking that each general should have like 3 choices, say, but taken from a big roster of possible level-upable things, to make things a bit more roguish. Like, maybe your general's skill tree is randomly like missile range, happiness, and armor buffing. And then with that general, you'll build an army around their specialization. I feel like maybe 3 Kingdoms was doing something more like that. I guess that's really all I wanted to say about leveling up. There is one other thing to note though. In Total War Pharaoh, leveling up can also unlock other perks based on your skill choices. So it might be something like, if you reach level 4 in movement range and 2 in upkeep, then you also get +4 cultural influence just as a side bonus. The interesting point to remember about all those side bonuses you can unlock is that there are bad ones as well. Like, having a certain amount of replenishment and movement range will actually reduce replenishment. I don't really remember what it was, but there was an interesting idea going on there, I thought, so you'd have to carefully navigate how you assigned your skill points to avoid getting things you don't want. That said, that would mean even less choice, basically. So, like, having bad perks is probably too avant-garde, but I liked the idea. I wanted to highlight it just for no reason. It would probably characterize the generals more if they were mechanically different, and the skill tree and how that might impact your build and the use of armies in battles in different ways because they spec'd into different things. It could all start there. We could have less repetition in the game, more distinction between characters, if the leveling system worked differently. That's all I'll claim for now, and with my hands waved sufficiently at a point, let's move on. With our main force, we have reached the northern edge of the map. There are loads of armies hanging out here, but we scooch on by and take the region easily. We have a huge advantage in battles now because this main army has our newer kinds of units in it. And by using the trading mechanics from earlier, we've got recruitment building upgrades earlier than the AI tends to have them. So we have higher tiers of units, and yes, for all the stats I didn't read when it came to units, tier is at least something we can rely on. It's a number from 1 to 5 that just vaguely represents how good a unit is supposed to be. Get the expensive units, that's the lesson you learn there. They'll pay for themselves. If you run out of money, then sell wood or something and just stop building things, because you'll be capturing buildings from the enemy faster than you can build your own anyway. Also, I didn't notice the enemy had an army behind us, so we had to send the second main force backwards to deal with that, but it's looking good enough. And yes, you saw our war with whoever it was in the west was precarious at first. They sent like 4 armies to bypass our front line using the Euphrates. However, then we just bum rushed them with stacks of cheap trash and took out 2 already. Here we go against the 3rd. And our numbers don't avail us, they've got the advantage. Mainly because my army is absolutely terrible. But are my tactics terrible? Let's see. For this one, we rely on good old-fashioned strategic initiative, which only gets granted to the attacker if the defender doesn't do anything, and handily they didn't. I think defensive AI works a bit too differently to offensive AI. They tend to fold up their formation as you move, and this is kind of a rookie mistake. This is what I, as a young gamer, would have done, because back in the day I was like, ooh, defender's advantage, that's a thing, like defending is good, defending is powerful. But maturing in the world of strategy is all about learning about initiative, where basically attacking is a lot easier than defending. Most of the time, like defender's advantage is a real thing, but it applies to like specifics of real life. It's talking about fortifications and getting food easier and like getting more sleep and things like that. In this game, if you stand still, that's just the worst possible move, and the defensive AI wants to just stand still. And historically, throughout the Total War games, there have been infinite exploits you can do if you're attacking. And usually, you should be attacking because like you're the one playing the game, you're actively moving about and starting fights in order to progress. So yes, if the AI stands there, you can do extremely slow and cumbersome moves like attack from 4 sides, as I did in this battle. Like at any point during the setup for that, if the enemy just detached half their army and attacked one of the flanking groups, we'd be in huge trouble. But they would never think to do that, because only an offensive AI is kind of looking for that sort of thing, I think anyway. So they just stand there and turn to face you, but that doesn't really make much difference. It's a bit better than doing absolutely nothing, and I think really old Total War AIs would have done absolutely nothing, so I'll give it that one. That's one win, but yes. They needed to try and break out of that situation. I'm just like shouting this advice across the battlefield to the opposing general. Break out! Like, I've only got like 4 units behind you. You can send like 8 units backwards and kill me. Like, why aren't you doing that? With an attack like this, it's fun because you get to find all of the best matchups for where each unit should charge into the enemy's like static defense. And yes, I'm complaining that the AI shouldn't play like this, aren't I? But gameplay-wise, it actually is good. It's more fun to fight a static enemy formation, because there's this kind of plan and execute type thought pattern you get to have, where you're doing something more complex than usual, despite the situation being simple. I've gotten into this kind of comment recently, like drawing depth and complexity out of gameplay by taking things away from it to make the player experience more complex as a result, because the task at hand is shrunk down such that it fits in your RAM, so to speak. You can make more personal feeling decisions and be more in control of the situation if it becomes simpler. And this makes your thoughts more relevant and allows more complex thoughts and more complex gameplay decisions. Well, this is an extremely vague point. I feel there is something to be said for the AI standing there and doing nothing, because it's fun to fight them in that situation, even though I'm complaining that it's technically bad AI. I don't know. I'm trying to get a PhD here in justifying low-quality AI. There is actually an honest argument to be made, like at the producer or director level, that you would risk losing something in your game if you made the AI too good. So don't always write off bad AI, folks. That's my parable today. The battle went alright. It's the kind of situation where maneuver units and ranged units on the enemy side won't really do anything because they're just stuck in the formation. Like, that's just another reason not to do their strategy. That gives us more effective strength than it looked like we had because we were just being more productive. Rear attacks all over the shop, soon everything's routing. I didn't bother though with the rout phase, and it did leave more than half of the enemy alive in the end, so there's evidence about my earlier speculation on whether you should kill routers. The answer is yes, unfortunately. Elsewhere, here's me auto-resolving another 51-49 battle because we're nearly done cleaning these guys up and I don't really need a good result now. And with that, I think the war situation in the west is stable. Our Assyrian vassals who started this war, are they going to follow up on this window I've created after destroying our mutual enemies' armies? No? No? Are they going to help in any way whatsoever? No? Average having a vassal experience.jpg. I didn't expect anything from them, but if I pull myself out of my battered gamer syndrome and stop accepting how bad your ally AI is, it's worth mentioning that it is bad. Like, you can't talk to them about what to do or have very much war coordination with them. There is a roundabout war coordination mechanic where you force vassals and allies to participate in particular battles or go after targets you mark. It's been around since Rome 2, and in my experience it doesn't really work. Like, you can use it, but slowly, and it might not work. I literally think you should just get control of your allies and vassals' armies if they let you. Like, you can just ask them and be like, here's my war coordination mechanic, give me an army. And that's it, and you just control it as if it's yours. Quite simple, but, you know, quite a break from the formula as well. I think that would be it. You know, this is a single player game, right? With one player. Let the player do the stuff, right? You know, it might be fun to play with units from other factions now and again too. It just seems like a win-win-win-win, especially if you take their units and get them killed so you can immediately betray that faction while they don't have an army. Yes, I like the sound of this more and more, the more and more I say about it. So consider my acceptance of having a terrible vassal over. I'm officially speaking out. We don't have to put up with our terrible AI vassals anymore. Legalize vassal divorce. I mean, legalize just like backseating the bejesus out of any faction you have a stake in, especially if you are the actual king of the universe, in-universe. Make that something mechanical there. Vassals are a hell of a drug, but together we can speak our truth and bring about change. Thanks for listening to this powerful and important message. What was I talking about? The game? Very unlikely. Also, I think some of those clips recently were in the wrong order. Maybe those battles happened the other way around. The end of the story is that we auto-resolved all of the stuff to death over there and then prepared to make a counter-offensive. Next, a very brief bell and whistle review for another feature, deities. I won't say much as I think I covered this more in a previous video and my overall comment remains the same. It's good. A really nice bell and or whistle, where you pick your gods and get different bonuses and buildings available to you. You can level up your dedication to gods to get more stuff, and it's integrated with the economy and even with the military gameplay, as armies can pray at shrines to get stat buffs and generals can be dedicated to gods to get buffs also, and it depends on what you choose. Like, it matters what gods you get, because the buffs they provide can be used extensively in all aspects of gameplay. It's an impactful decision that also extends the building tree, because getting more gods gives you more options for temples, all of which have really different effects. So, like, just the religion building tree alone has more stuff in it than the rest of the game, and you like pick what parts of it you want to use. There are like 20 gods to pick from, not shown here. There are loads of possible builds and synergies to look for in there, although you need to discover gods by having some of your empire touch their places of origin, meaning in practice, you are limited to your own culture's pantheon and the gods you can steal from your neighbours. A very cool and authentic mechanic. I really like everything to do with religion. It actually matters, not enough to talk about it anymore, but yeah, that's my favourite upgrade to the Rome 2-like economy formula right there. Now let's finally get into some real action. Things went down all of a sudden, because the only other large faction in our area of the map, the yellow faction to the northwest, declares war on us, and the balance bar on the diplomacy screen immediately tells us they have at least as much of an empire out there in the fog of war as us, or at least their army is as big as ours. I think that's what the balance bar really looks at. Of course, it doesn't actually tell you. We border them quite a lot to the northwest, as do the Assyrians, so a general war in the north is suddenly upon us. And of course, at the same time, someone else also wants to attack my useless vassal. And this turns out to be the red faction, on the other side of the red faction we're already fighting in the west. Did anyone else play Red Faction on PS1? There was a battle right away, as apparently one of the new hostile armies was parked beside our armies already. But since it's the end turn sequence, and it's in our territory, we can just auto-resolve them away and ignore the 700 men we lost, because we'll get about 200 men back immediately from post-battle replenishment. Then, like 200 to 400 back again on top of that, because the start of turn replenishment kicks in immediately, leading to an extremely good trade by the end of that, an excellent way to kick things off. They somehow managed to orchestrate a surprise attack on themselves, really. Thanks, new nameless faction to fight. Basically everything we can see to the west and north is now hostile to us, making up the majority of our empire's border, and ruining my neat and comfy plan to attack the Elamites in the northeast and capture the ultimate corner spot up there. I'm forced to rethink, as we need to march everything west. Instead, I negotiated non-aggression with the guys in the top right, Kengir, because the ultimate problem would be if I go west now, then Kengir could attack me, which they totally should, but after establishing non-aggression pacts and some useful long-term trade agreements, they probably won't want to, like who knows. I recall I eventually paid them a buttload of cash to be my vassal, to make it even less likely they would betray me. I can't remember when, but I think it was soon, because I was probably looking to secure that corner ASAP, because I would have already known that realistically, we're not going back there. Our new war will require us to conquer our way to a distant location way off map at the moment, so coming back over here would be a huge waste. I want to avoid it. Yes, the King of the Universe may spare his enemies as long as there is someone more convenient to kill. It's like that thing where you don't have to be able to outrun a bear, you need to be able to outrun the slowest human in your group when a bear shows up. So yes, let's have a massive war then. It's a total war game. We're nearly 2 hours into this commentary, probably about 10 hours into the actual game. Can we defeat basically everything we can see all at once? Now, with the gauntlet thrown down, let's ruin everything by telling you what actually happened. Things get started pretty well, because we can start pushing into that nearer red faction to claim some spoils after all our recent victories. We were already set up for that one. We even take out some rebels along the way, that's nice of me. Then, to continue deflating any tension, I peaced out with the nearer red faction. They had no armies, so they will accept this. And while that means I'm going to be missing out on some more targets effectively, I want to pivot to face northward with my 2 armies in this area, being more concerned with what the yellow faction might do. Ekerma, the yellow guys are called. We don't really border the further red faction, so I'm not going to go that way. The province system essentially makes it too annoying to go take something that's not contiguous with your existing lands, which is just a downside of the province system. I could, without that, use the rivers to very rapidly go west and suddenly capture 1 or 2 places over there somewhere, in only a turn or 2, but then the UI would be mad at me, and they'd probably rebel because I couldn't make enough buildings because of the province restrictions. I learned that the other red faction actually does want peace, probably because we just already annihilated their army like in the first turn of the war, even though they started this war, so they're having second thoughts already. However, they do control a random territory I do border over to the east, just somehow, so I want to take that before peacing out. I already had my 2 main armies milling about over there, so we'll just get onto that right now. Then here's what I was preparing for in the west. Ekerma starts to mobilize against us with 4 armies coming down the Tigris like cruise missiles, immediately throwing themselves into range of settlements we would have taken at the start of the campaign and all just unguarded and probably didn't bother being given any garrison buildings or anything because I wasn't ever planning to fight over them. That's what our 2 western armies will have to deal with now. They'll race onto the scene and just try to control that. Back east, our 2 quote-unquote main armies go and attack that settlement I wanted to take, and well, we get it pretty easily. There's not enough there to stop us. After that, I go and talk to this faction again, and I do peace out with them, removing a whole load more hostile regions from the west. And really that's it, like those last 2 turns were the big strategic event of the campaign. You might think, but wasn't that just nothing? And yes, like that's what I'm going to be getting at here. That was the game's chance to stop me, and they didn't. Like, perfectly within the rules, perhaps they shouldn't have in a just game rule setup, but we're going to start looking at this from a directorial standpoint, where we think, should the developers have intervened in a situation like this to make that work out, to make the tension that was building there actually remain or go anywhere? Because it's just us versus Akuma now, we're going to be fine. Like, they can be annoying, but I can recruit units faster than them, so like they can't win this war, even if we just sort of brain-deadly brawl with each other, and we might even do something more intelligent than that, in which case we'll be even better off. I can throw more units in than them. My units are probably better because I've rushed that tech tree with Kuduru and the building tree with all the trading of stone and wood that I was cutting out, the stuff I mentioned before. We're ahead of them in many ways. So, I don't really have anything epic to present to you now. Like, it was all a scam. Despite attempting to hype this conflict up in the past and kind of thinking, yeah, that was the part of the campaign when things were tense. I guess that's not true. Like, I'm lying to you, I'm lying to myself. This moment was the realm divide moment, if you like, or it could have been, or perhaps should have been. That's what I'm going to argue now. This realm divide concept is the thing that CA sometimes throws into Total War campaigns to provide some sort of mix-up towards the end that renews the challenge. The infamous case I'm naming this after was Realm Divide in Shogun 2, where after a while the game would just make you fight the entire map at the same time. Pure and simple, like hugely unfair, memeable consequences, and as I recall, people didn't really like it, but the map was very feature heavy. You could do a lot of strategy to really work against that uphill battle. It was doable. E.g., like your front line was usually really short even if you fought millions of opponents at once, so they would be like choke pointed against you a lot of the time and you could keep control of the situation. Other examples are things like forcing a gigantic civil war on you at some point, or like chaos shenanigans in the Warhammer titles. Total War Pharaoh Dynasties doesn't have something like that. Well, it kind of does actually, we'll get to that. It doesn't have anything that affected me in this campaign, so it doesn't guarantee anything like that will happen. And maybe it should. It's annoying to be like, yes, the game should force something to happen, like against the game's normal rules. For example, it could force everybody now to ally against me and not peace out of these wars, like to maintain the pressure against me, just because the AI doesn't need to survive. The AI's only purpose in the game is to interact with me, so like they don't need to play by like logical rules anymore. They should fight to the death against me because they're trying to stop me, and then if that was the case, I would complain that that was the case. It's a very difficult situation, which is arising from the fact you've made a positive feedback loop based game that is long enough that the gameplay extends way beyond like where the loops stop mattering, but you still have to play it. And if you're not going to inject something and basically deliberately ruin the loop in an unfair seeming way, then not much is going to happen. And I present this campaign as evidence of this taking place. Well, we're probably going to win this war. I'm speaking as if I've won it already, aren't I? But, you know, we're the number one faction. We've been the number one faction for a while. The game does tell you when you're the number one faction, so we've known we're the strongest for a long time. Akuma are number 3, so we're fighting somebody in the big leagues, but we still have a roughly 2-to-1 advantage now that everyone else has been kicked off the field, plus the advantage of being the player, which is both a skill advantage and a mechanical advantage, because as I've said, many of the bells and whistles provide player-only advantages. In Total War Pharaoh, the thing that is supposed to spice all of this up is the Sea People invasions, where it spawns millions of enemies, similar to the Chaos invasions in the Warhammer titles. But out here, in the Cradle of Civilization, that kind of stuff just don't fly, I guess. We're too civilized. There are no sea peoples like making it this far. I don't actually know where they come from, but we never saw them in this campaign, so it's nowhere around here. Whereas in Warhammer, I think even though Chaos are supposed to be coming from the top of the map, they would also just appear at the bottom. So like if you were playing at the bottom, you still participate in that part of the game just anyway, just whatever. That might seem unfair. You might think, damn, why is Chaos here? But then if they weren't there, you might think, damn, why is nothing happening in the campaign? A difficult situation once again. I always knew, I guess, this commentary would bring us to this anticlimax. I even considered not making these videos because I thought some people will be annoyed that I'm making this big campaign commentary that essentially amounts to me talking about how nothing mattered or nothing happened. But there's value in that, isn't there? Because we need to point out that nothing happened in this game, and that shouldn't really have been the case. They didn't do anything too unusual. This was a pretty normal approach to the game, and stuff didn't work, so something needs to be done. And this is the capital letters something I keep referring to, where it could just be anything. There are so many options for what we could do that there's no point going into it, because we're just sitting here with nothing. We need to go in a direction, and then we'll talk about that once the idea has been proposed. I could propose the ideas myself, but I don't want to tempt myself. We've got stuff to talk about with what we've got already. All I'll do is advocate here then for an intervention from the developers in some way, a negative feedback loop style event that I will still reserve the right to complain about once it happens, but it should be there, I guess. Like, Shogun 2 would be worse if there was no realm divide. People didn't like it. There were like mods released to remove the realm divide because it was so unfair feeling, but I guess it does need to be there. The ultimate solution is going to be something bigger, where it's possible to include a mechanic like that without it feeling wrong. But if we're not going to be talking about gigantic changes, here, in Total War Pharaoh, the gods must intervene. Like, everyone has to ally against you for some reason. They need the See People event to affect the player specifically, just for some reason. Like, it's not a static event in the world happening in a location that makes sense or is historical or anything like that. It's just a thing that happens to hunt down the player. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you are. You're the one playing the game. Everything that happens to you. Okay, so the See People, they're from Babylon now. Right, bang, there are 10 stacks at Babylon. Now we're going to do something. You could even make a player bias like that optional in the campaign setup menu to perhaps placate the fact that people would find that to be extremely bullshit and unfair. The other approach would be rubber banding. This is the more classic video game negative feedback loop approach. Just make the other factions automatically get stronger in tandem with you so that everybody keeps pace with you. Like, this is a super unpopular mechanical approach, but it can be done, and it can be done quietly as well. I think even some of the Total Wars do this, where some factions will be chosen as the major faction, so they're assigned to be the special factions that should do well in the campaign, and the game just cheats a little bit for them. Like, I seem to recall in Rome Total War, the OG, Rome just gets money so that they win. Like, it just gives them extra money because they're supposed to win, that sort of thing. It's trying to set up a challenge where if you're not playing as Rome, you'll eventually face half the map controlled by Rome. Something like that, for all I know, could already be happening in Total War Pharaoh Dynasties. It probably is, to be fair, a little bit. It just needed to be way more, and the rubber banding might be that as I became the #1 faction out in Babylon, something in the background's like, you know what? Let's just say that Egypt has unified, and now there's a massive Egyptian kingdom out there, and they're coming for Babylon right now. Something like that kind of has to happen, because with this fair rule set where you're leaving what happens to chance and just playing by the rules, because the player is going to have an experience based entirely on the result of a positive feedback loop, then if there's nothing that can break the loop in the quote-unquote fair rules, and things that break the loop probably would be considered unfair in many cases, then the result of the game is a foregone conclusion, isn't it? And that's just the problem with this kind of game, I suppose. We're going around in circles here, aren't we? What I can do is play on very hard instead of hard. That might make things a bit different, or make the campaign have gone differently. It makes the AI cheat a bit more, although I don't think the difficulty level cheats apply to Autoresolves, which means most results in this campaign wouldn't be different. I think the AI makes a stronger empire faster because they have some economic cheats. However, then you go and capture it, so you also get the stronger empire faster as well, because most of the buildings you get are just the ones you get for free when you take enemy settlements. So it's a bit hard to say if increasing the difficulty even really makes that much difference. The solution needs to be mechanical. It needs to be not just fudging the numbers. It needs to be alien invasion, literally alien invasion, just something. The enemy gods did something, alright? The enemy gods got together and they spawned 20 stacks of sea people in your territory. Is that fun? No. Which is why I'd always say that should be optional. You should be able to turn stuff like that off for people who do want to just paint the map and get the result of their successful use of a positive feedback loop game design. And don't get me wrong, this is what I wanted to talk about next actually, the kind of Skinner box aspect of the game. I think it works. I liked this campaign. That's probably impossible to tell from what I've said so far. I found it fun and compelling to paint the map and be rewarded for my early diligence in maxing out the economy as soon as possible and getting good buff setups going. Things like that. It is only that, in achieving this, like the cool part of the game, where anything interesting really happened, was essentially used up early on. But the game wasn't done, like we were still required to do stuff after that. So we're left with this figurative route phase of the campaign, where like I have to win, like there isn't anything I can do to stop myself from winning now, and the game isn't going to intervene, so I will win. But I guess there's fun to be had in just playing that out and being like, yes, now I paint the map, now every battle is easy, now I can skip them all, like that sort of thing. I'm complaining about it, I'm being facetious, I do think it's fun. As I said before, like I like just sitting there on the campaign map, listening to the music, so like it's fun from a particular perspective. But when it comes to sitting here looking back and talking about it and being like, was that a good strategy game? It's like, well, I guess not, but you know, it was a fun relaxation simulator, wasn't it? This Total War game. Like with a name like Total War, you expect a relaxing, easy time. We are just sort of painting the map with your little brush. You're just planting crops and watching them grow, and you know, you will win. There's no lose state in this game. It's just a chill game, just a casual game. And I liked it for that, but I think other people might not like it for that and might think, wait a second, why isn't this game the exact opposite of how it actually is? Like, isn't that what it's supposed to be? I'm kind of spoiling what's going to happen here. We are going to win this war, we are going to win this campaign, like there's nothing between us and victory now, and I think that's actually been true for quite a long time. By the end of the first part, we were the #1 faction, I believe, we were getting there at least. We had certainly started the positive feedback loop that would cause us to win the campaign, in the absence of anything that suddenly stops that from happening, and as we've discussed, there isn't anything. Maybe it should just be like XCOM or something, where the enemy just gets stronger no matter what you do, and this doesn't feel good. It's more of a survival game than a strategy game. Or maybe every time you take a region, the destabilizing effect or some hand-wavy thing causes more people to join the growing Sea People armies, and it strengthens their cause. So like there's just some mechanical reason why something bad's going to happen based on you conquering territories a realm divide is building, and you always know it's going to happen, so it feels a little bit less bullshit. Or maybe the whole map just blames you for destabilizing civilization with your warmongering, and they ally against you to take you out. They've got some excuse, and then there's a final boss type gauntlet to test your build and defenses. I'm just like, how can we force there to be a realm divide here? But also, I'm very aware that people didn't like it, so it's like, how can we force just something good here? Like, we can go beyond my claims that it should be just something, like putting a realm divide in. Yes, that is just something. Why don't we have higher ambitions? Something good. Well, maybe that's a whole different discussion. A good idea? No, I don't have good ideas. I just have ideas. Like, that should be enough, right? Well, maybe nothing was the correct answer, because at least you can't go too far wrong with nothing. Just relax, listen to the ambient music. Our number is larger than the enemy number, so let's watch the enemy number be subtracted from our number, leaving us with a higher number. Still, in the end, what you would expect. And while that happens, I'm going to extend this commentary further than I originally planned. I wanted to kind of end it around here, but I ranted too much before and we haven't got as far as I wanted. And I've got more things written down I wanted to rant about before the end, so let's just keep going. We'll see how I did clear up the Akerma situation soon enough. And then a loop will go on where I steamroll the entire map and it doesn't matter anymore, so we'll probably skip to the end of that. Let's get everything covered and then close the book forever on Total War Dynasties, I expect. Total War Dynasties, I guess that's what we're calling it now, whatever. We'll carry on advancing, and I'm going to talk about something that isn't really being shown here, but I feel I'm doing this thing constantly, only it's extremely brief, so it doesn't really come up in the footage. I'm using Outpost buffs. Often you'll see icons beside armies, which represent that they have these time-limited Outpost buffs applied to them. And this constitutes the biggest of all the player-only advantages. I really thought I'd talk about this earlier, but there isn't any continuous clip of me using it, I guess, so it never came up. These clips of me not using it will have to suffice for now. You're watching OffiD's Game Grounds. The Outpost system allows you to place buildings outside of your settlements, a unique set of buildings with a bit less choice, but some extremely powerful functionalities. A notable example is the fort, which we even saw briefly a moment ago, which is a building that requires a siege to take. It can store units and automatically adds its garrison to the settlement if you don't attack it before trying to take the region. A nice defensive feature to have. Other buildings buff the economy. You can get influence, which is like culture conversion or religion in this game. You can get legitimacy, which I guess does nothing, but I got it anyway. And there are faction-specific buffs too, I think. I believe our one is something like a refugee camp, which adds random units to your garrisons, only half remembering that. There are ones that can be used to train your units and level them up, although this is way more expensive than buying new units, so generally isn't even slightly worth it. There's also an outpost line based on your god choices. So the god choice unlocks even more special buildings, and I used our main god's outpost in every single province because it gave you a massive happiness boost, allowing me to completely ignore the happiness mechanics. Even when advancing at full speed, which is supposed to cause rebellions, theoretically all the places I take here could rebel against me. But our gods have rizzed everyone up and got them paying taxes with a smile on their face, I guess. So yes, outposts are an amazing step forward for Total War, in that they add loads of new choices to your economy buildings and just the campaign gameplay in general. And it's integrated with the military gameplay in a way that is, for me, a first step in the right direction to completely redesigning how the economy should work in a Total War game, like a game about Total War. Credit where credit is due, Empire Total War already did this, and Roman Medieval Total War lets you put forts anywhere and have garrisons anywhere, so really what we're doing here is clawing back some of the features that were drowned, I guess, in the great deluge of the Rome 2-like Total War design. But I will still make my claim that the Outpost system makes Total War Pharaoh, makes it cross the line for having the best overall economy in the franchise, the overall best campaign management experience. I don't think it's even close in that regard, actually. I'll stop short of saying that it's good. I'm not so sure of that. Like, this is the clarification I want to make. It's the best. Not necessarily like the best it could be, it's the best out of what we've seen so far. It's a great, how do I make this gameplay flow better without actually changing it type design approach, I think. Add some really big and cool bells and really shrill and hard to ignore whistles. And I haven't even got to why I liked the Outpost system so much. And that is because it's hideously overpowered. It's outrageously overpowered. Outposts give the player specifically a huge advantage over the AI because of the interaction mechanics. I'm not sure about this, but I believe the AI can't interact with outposts other than to attack them, which means they don't get the huge buffs the interaction mechanics give you. Let me stack up all the interlocking parts that make the outpost buffs ridiculous. First, to get them, all you have to do is walk up to an outpost. Usually, there is an outpost either on the road or in a relevant direction to where you're going, so rarely will you go out of your way to achieve this first condition. Once you get there, you'll get a buff based on what the outpost building is, things like reduced upkeep, increased range, battle stats or morale, or specific packages based on your religion, even increased replenishment by like 20%, and that's 20% in absolute terms, i.e. a 2,000 strong army gets 400 men added for free every turn. And for free is the keyword, because all outpost buffs cost nothing to apply. And they last a few turns, more than long enough to go to another outpost and get some more, because they are all over the map and you're never more than 1 or 2 turns from another chance to get an outpost buff. Already, it's overpowered. Like, the player just gets powerful buffs, they're better than all the techs and level up skills combined, they get them for free, even from the very start of the game. Like, it's unlikely they have to move differently to get them, the player is just cheating, right? But that's only the beginning. Whenever you receive an outpost buff, 50% of the movement cost of reaching the outpost gets restored. This is ludicrous because movement range is such a powerful effect. Like, reducing the amount of turns it takes to do things is the strongest positive feedback loop in the game. Saving 1 turn on doing something saves thousands of resources, denies the enemy build time, gives you less time where happiness is destabilizing before you install buildings in new captures, and of course, it means you can do more before timed buffs wear off, making the buffs even more powerful than they already were. As in, if you get that 400 free men per turn buff, you need to be able to move far enough to actually lose that many men in constant battles to get the most value out of it. And you know what else a 50% movement refund can do? It can allow you to walk to another outpost in the same turn. And this is where the true madness sets in, because yes, outpost buffs stack and you get the movement refund again, so you can keep moving. You can double your movement range if there are outposts in vaguely the right direction, and there usually are. The more movement range you have, the more likely it becomes that there is an outpost on your way. This passes a breakpoint where your average movement range becomes greater than the average distance between outposts, meaning you can go from sometimes getting one outpost on your route to usually getting two, like all of a sudden. And that's not all. You can also enter Forced March Stance, the mode that lets you move further but prevents armies from starting battles. It doesn't stop them from using outposts though, and also that will give you something like a 50% buff to your movement range, making cases where there are 2 outposts on your route pretty much guaranteed, and 3 outposts comes into maybe territory. You're starting to get 2 to 3 turns of movement all at once every turn, and ending it with several instances of the most powerful buffs in the game being on your army. And you can pay gold to build outposts in 0 turns. That means if there isn't an outpost on your route, but there could be, you can build one in front of you and immediately take the movement refund and buffs for your next move. My gold income is through the roof because I got some endgame tech that gives you gold for every max level city you control, and I had already rushed all my cities to max level through trading. So we can insta-build anything basically with this building with gold mechanic, and I do remember putting down outposts right in front of me in some of these newly captured places to speed our onward movement. And with that, we can partially explain how I conquered Akerma completely in pretty much 10 turns, i.e. about as long as it would take to walk across their empire. Like, we just folded them, taking a settlement with each army group most turns, so quickly that any recruitment buildings they might have had were always getting captured, and armies they might have made were useless, and also it would have destabilized their provinces, which does reduce recruitment capacity, I think, because of some subtle, like, quasi-hidden debuff in a tooltip somewhere that comes from having low happiness. It makes it hard to recruit things, I think. They would have had the money to build back, but they never really got started with it. We were all over them with our movement replenishment build generals just constantly passing those breakpoints where they'd managed to reach a new settlement in only 1 turns, leaving no breathing room. Absolute war machine gameplay. I suppose I could do this 100 more times and capture Egypt or something. Like, we were the #1 faction when we were half the size we are now. I don't know what we are now. King of the universe, I guess. What I wanted to say is that the AI should probably get the outpost buffs, like as for starters there, and use them against you. But then I thought, no, I'm not going to say that. Not only because it being player only is hilariously powerful, but because it makes me think it might be almost impossible to program the AI such that it considers outposts, and this comes down to pathfinding. So allow me to give you some insight on programming pathfinding, which might explain why the AI can't be allowed to use the outpost system. The outpost system works most powerfully when an army stops off at 1 or more outposts on the way to a true destination. That's our premise. If the AI wants to move from A to B, what it's going to do programmatically behind the scenes is check every possible way of getting from A to B and find the one that costs the least movement points and then set off on that route. Realistically, they'll do something called A-star pathfinding, or like a heuristic, which will cause the pathfinding code to presume that walking directly at the target is a good idea, so it doesn't waste aeons checking for the off chance that walking 500 miles in the wrong direction first doesn't reveal the only true optimal route, which can happen in pathfinding. Like, to go from one side of a wall to another, you might have to walk really far in the wrong direction to get to a door first, like stuff like that. In Total War, or in Total War Pharaoh, in Total War Rome 2 onwards at the very least, the basic map design means they probably only have to tell stuff to walk in a straight line, because straight lines are fine most of the time. Very cool. But now let's go from saying that instead of going from A to B, we also wanted to try and hit points C and D on the way, if they happen to be on the way, or they're close enough to being on the way, because the buffs from doing that are so good that maybe it's worth even not getting to B as fast to get them. Already we have to program in a really complicated and context-specific value judgment to even decide whether to go for outposts. If we fudge it and just say it's always going to try and get outposts, the programming code still has the fun task of being like, well, okay, we can find the shortest route from A to B, but if we ever pass within a certain radius of these other points C and D, then we also have to path them in and change the whole path, with the added complication that going to C or D also changes how much movement we have, unlocking new complications where once you reach C, you might be able to now also reach E in the same turn, and maybe that's a better choice to go for, and more decisions have to be made, and the pathfinding probably has to start again, because to be perfectly strict, it needs to like go back to A, and then go like, is it faster to go straight to E and then back to C, like instead of that other thing I discovered earlier? It has to check that possibility. Or if you want to be really strict, it better check if there's a door 500 miles to the east that goes to a teleporter that leads directly to my destination, like something like that. It has to check for these things. Basically, one pathfinding calculation that's originally just going to be a straight line becomes at least like 3 different ones, and that's at least 3 times the amount of frames you have to wait for the end turn calculation per faction to go through. And I suspect it would only get worse than that, because the movement buffs are going to create some sort of feedback loop where more and more pathfinding nodes are brought into the calculations, and more outposts become possible destinations. You might even want it to be able to change the end target midway through the pathfinding calculation. If the AI notices, it can attack a certain army, but only after finding there's a certain combination of outpost buffs it could grab on the way that gives it the movement to do so in this turn. Things like that. And then it would have to restart the entire pathfinding algorithm to try and do that route, just in case there's something in front of the army that means it can't be done, unless it first takes a door slightly to the west first and finds a new route. Blah, blah, blah. If you want a map with 100 factions making pathfinding calls every turn, and that's time when the player just has to wait, so you have to minimize that to have the player still be playing the game. You ideally want all of the entities to just walk in straight lines with no obstacles, nothing can intervene, no real-time considerations, because doing those pathfinding calculations is probably what most of the CPU time is doing during the AI turn. Surprisingly, like even the most brain-dead pathfinding is quite CPU intensive. Like I've done it, I've implemented A-star programming over like, say 200 steps of movement. Not that many, right? Like I walk 200 steps, I can pathfind that just fine. Your computer can't. If it can walk in one of 8 directions for each step, it has to consider things like if I walk 3 steps forwards, then 1 step to the left, and then keep walking forwards. Is that better than walking 4 steps forward, 1 step back right, and then up and right, and then forward? Like, there's a gajillion calculations. There's, if you're walking in 8 directions, 200 to the power of 8 combinations. Like, it gets out of hand really fast. So I feel this mathematical sympathy with how basic the map is, and how the outpost system simply can't be connected to the AI with as anything other than like a target for destruction as the end point of the pathfinding, with no interaction or use of its movement buff mechanics being possible, without also really churning the end turn sequence down like in the good old days, and I guess they just want to avoid that. That's my insight there, so I'll let them off the hook. Outposts. Hell of a drug. Amazing addition. They're overpowered. They're technically not new, but it feels like it is, and the AI just stays losing every day. If you want to survive the AI apocalypse, I recommend standing in a position where the route to reach you has a necessary choke point at least 200 paces in the opposite direction from where the machine army is approaching. I hope you guys live in a really long hallway, very far from the only door into it, facing the opposite direction to the nearest like Amazon warehouse. You might last a little longer than you'd expect. We've dealt with Akuma, we've dealt with some other random bits and bobs. Now I'm back at war with the more distant of our 2 Red Faction ex-enemies, and hence we're going west in an awkward way that will make our borders terrible. Here I wanted to mention that if you look beside the names of our generals towards the bottom, you will see a mysterious red button to the right. I never clicked that button, but it's another bell and whistle to mention. I guess before I was saying that Legitimacy doesn't do anything, and while that's true now, up to a point it does do something, and this button is what it does. Legitimacy unlocks and upgrades special Royal Command features, kind of in the background. This is similar to, but slightly different from, the other Royal Command type mechanic. Maybe it was called Dynasty Command or something. The one that's on the sidebar on the right that I forgot existed as mentioned in part 1. This other Royal Command type system is more specific. So because I've unlocked a command, that I believe boosts army stats and maybe even replenishment too. That command appears on the army UI. I also have one that lets you bribe enemy armies, which only appears when enemy armies are selected, that being pretty much never, further enhancing my ability to forget to ever use these abilities. But there you go, worth a mention. You can unlock things based on legitimacy, and it's another one of the 2,937 sources of buffs in the game. Probably it's player only again, it's probably overpowered if you actually remember that it's there. Well, it's OP to use a game's mechanics anyway. That's what the Elden Ring kerfuffle taught me, where people were saying you're not allowed to summon things in Elden Ring because it makes it too easy, so you're not playing it for real. I think the equivalent challenge in Total War Pharaoh would be to disallow the use of reinforcements. You've probably noticed I tend to attack with 2 armies all the time, because 2 armies can do pretty much anything without taking any losses, so your momentum just goes on forever, even though you're attacking half as many targets as you could do. So yes, I'm not a true gamer, I'm playing the game the way that works best, but is more dishonorable, if you like. I missed another mechanic there to make up for that at least, very cool. Now I'm going to tell you about another mechanic I semi-missed, which I think is more of a shame this time, the civilization collapse system. At the top of the screen there's a bar there monitoring how civilized the world currently is. It's the thing at the bottom of the top UI element. And basically, if other factions do badly, if lots of territories get damaged or razed, the entire world loses civilization points, including you. It's a little unfair in that you can be ultra-civilized in your own territory, but still get the chaos debuffs because of someone else. And I think the unfairness is kind of the point, that's why it's interesting. You can't ignore the state of the world because you are part of it. That world isn't ignoring you. It's an interesting step in a non-isolationist, more like dynamic direction, where the fates of the nameless factions might actually matter. You might care what's going on in the world, might even bother revealing some of the map to find out what's going on. And I wanted to give this a shout out really. It's a nice Bronze Age type thing, because what you hear about the Bronze Age is that the world was very interconnected, like the big civilizations were intermingling, and that the collapse of one was causing the collapse of others because of that. There's something thematic going on here in some mechanics that just don't really come through, I guess. I'm going to give the mechanic a shout out anyway. I didn't really pay attention to our civilization score. Civilization dropped down to the middle as the campaign went on. I can't really tell you what that does specifically. Something bad, I think. I think if you're playing as a more chaotic civilization, then civilization levels going down might be good. Like if you are the Sea Peoples, you get buffs if civilization goes down, things like that. I think it debuffs various economic things. Certain technologies get their effects reduced. Some technologies actually get better if civilization goes down, even if you are playing as a civilized faction. For me, I guess I didn't worry about any of the debuffs that were going to come from the civilization collapse system, mainly because the main source of debuffs for me is the other meter that's up there. Just to the right of that meter, there's that blue meter towards the top right. That's the real problem. This is the administration complexity meter, a system where you gain points based on how big your empire is and how many units you have, stuff like that. You level up your administration through this, and this comes with huge debuffs. This is the main negative feedback loop mechanic that Total War will usually have. In the past, it's often been called corruption, where you get a penalty to income if you get too strong. And this is basically that, but with a nicer presentation, and much clearer explanations of what causes the meter to go up and what happens at each administration level. Again, you don't have to like this idea, but it's the best implementation of the idea the series has seen, so we've got to give it that. The big issue is that, well, you're going to have negative feedback unfairness again, essentially. You suffer from success, but the game wouldn't work if you didn't, so we're just screwed. Like, we've doubled our empire size recently, but I haven't doubled my army size because we're still operating at a loss, thanks to the massive debuffs you incur by taking territories. It's several armies worth of upkeep being deducted per turn at this point. I think the idea is to make things not too easy, of course, by slowing the positive feedback loop, but I think a completely new direction is required if that's your solution. Like, you need to take a look at this setup where you can become runaway powerful and say, if we don't want the player to steamroll everyone once they get strong enough, because we as the developers don't think they'll like it, or we want to impose they shouldn't be allowed to do this for whatever reason, then our answer should be to not have that happen in the game at a fundamental level. I think I'm dreaming again of the idea I mentioned where like small factions just side with you if you're stronger than them, and in turn actually deploying armies is a difficult thing to do, and it's very easy to lose that allegiance from the small factions at the same time. So you might not want to go off like killing weak factions. This would be hard in some way to prevent you becoming like really centralized and powerful such that the game would be trivial. I'm kind of looking for something with a vaguely historic feel, like how come actual empires didn't take over the world? There are actual reasons. Can we make mechanics out of those actual reasons? Another option, by the way, would be to just end the campaign earlier. We can skip this whole discussion by just saying, okay, if it gets too easy for you, you just win and the campaign stops. Just say the goal of the campaign is to become the #1 faction, and then that's it, because it's a game where whoever is winning will keep winning. Like, that's how the rules of the game work. So actually playing out the route phase, so to speak, where you just do the keep winning part, is a different mode of gameplay effectively, and I think the developers are doing things like the administration level debuffs because they don't want that mode of gameplay to be there. So why not just end the campaign and ask the player to start another one? Like, that's my thought. I'm kind of leaning towards a strategy puzzle approach where the game has like 100 campaigns, and it's like, do this before turn 50. You may not recruit a new army, and like that's the challenge. You're kind of thinking about doing something specifically. Once you've done it, you've won. Less of an open-ended gameplay experience, because I think the open-ended gameplay experience, while fun, is causing the issue the developers are fighting with. It's like you can't make a reliable challenge for the player to overcome in a game where it's possible for the player to become extremely powerful and never face any challenges, while the game still has 75% of its runtime left. We need to coalesce the strategic stuff that is there in the Total War experience into something more strategy game-like, something more bite-sized. I guess I could impose those challenges on myself, and like the classic Total War challenge is to just be at war with everyone all the time. Something that probably would have made this campaign and commentary far more interesting. But I play the hands the developers dealt me and then blame them for everything as usual, so there it is. There is a really neat Bronze Age dream state simulation here in this game. I think with just a few tweaks it could also be a strategy game like no other. The frustratingly good potential remains juxtaposed with me spending the entire second half of the campaign slaughtering hapless AI settlements as a kind of therapeutic workout. And again, I can't stress this enough, if the game didn't have nice ambient music, I probably wouldn't have liked it. I just really like ambient music. I'm sure my bias there is why I actually liked the game, and like why I liked all the stuff I'm implying is bad. I played the second half of this campaign eagerly. I was looking forward to playing this. I hoped I never had to do a fight, because I was loving the campaign flow state. I didn't want anything to interrupt it. So, is it really that bad? If I liked it so much, that's a real question to ask. Probably yes, like some of the stuff is bad, technically, but it's good that this mode of play was possible. So what I'll say is I would be mad, it would also be bad, if the campaign options were thinned down such that this couldn't happen. I just want something more real to be available, and probably for something more real to be the main mode of play of the game. I want my hardcore, like, win without ever touching the mouse, challenges, whatever, like a real sort of crafted campaign experience that's more about strategy. But I also do want this, what we have here, like the sandbox, grand strategy where everyone plays by the same rules, except the player actually gets to cheat constantly, so it's not the same rules, have fun. Game mode, which is what the game is as it stands. I think that's kind of weak and watered down, but it is good that it's there. So as you saw, we ended up conquering a load of the Red Faction's territories, and then very much all of a sudden, we win the campaign. This is a problem Total War has had for a long time, the problem of victory being sudden, and not in response to anything particularly important in some of the games anyway. Because it's a gradual accumulation of victory conditions that gets easier towards the end, and you just sort of suddenly do it in the background. There's no final battle, and maybe, even though it would be unfair and bullshit and fake in the way we've talked about before to have a final battle now, maybe there still should just be something anyway, like you have to defeat the Sea Peoples to win the campaign. And when you meet the victory conditions, all the Sea Peoples converge on you to force that final battle, and then the you win screen is after that. Something like that might be nice, even if it doesn't really make sense in the rules of the game. But that aside, I do have a more important absolutely massive killer suggestion that I think would be an ultra easy and super effective way to improve this ending situation and make it feel less random. The victory points counter needs to be on the main UI. There, I said it. Was that a crime? Is it a crime to enjoy a succulent Babylonian victory? Basically, in Total War Pharaoh, the way you win the campaign is again the best the series has ever been, where you have this massive list of like 1 million different possible objectives, and you're free to do whatever you want. You need to get like a third of them to win the campaign overall, and more if you want to get the higher tiers of victory, although I think that's pretty pointless because it's trivially easy to get the higher ones if you have the lower ones, just a test of micro and patience really. So I'm not interested in that. As I've said, I'm happy for the victory to be earlier than this. I think we were done with this campaign after the Akerma War started, and that was literally half the campaign ago at this point. Nothing has happened since then. Anyway, there's a cool list. It's a great idea, you get points for doing stuff. Mainly it is taking territory, because that's the game. But what you need is to see an indication of when those points are being awarded. It needs to be there on the main UI 100% of the time, going up in direct response to what you're doing. So you can anticipate that victory is on its way and feel more rewarded for everything you do. There is even a nice space in the top left that isn't used, where a bar, which is a mirror image of the admin bar, could be placed. A nice golden bar that stretches up and provides a shortcut to the full list of your achievements if you want to see them. That would just be a really slam dunk, low effort way to tie everything in the game together just a bit more. This is the one suggestion I would say I have complete confidence in. It's cheap and great. You probably wouldn't sacrifice anything to achieve this. Chef's kiss once again. So yes, we won. Babylon is the number 1 faction. We're probably double the size of the number 2 faction, whoever that might be, and by the time we actually reach whoever they are, we'll probably be quadruple their size. The momentum is endless. It's only turn 60 or 70 as I recall by the end, which is relatively early. The other factions won't have their endgame units available, but we do. Let's just say Babylon conquered the entire world, nay, the entire universe. Now we're going to look at a couple more bells and whistles that I only actually noticed after the campaign was over. There are so many of these. Here we've got level-upable general traits, where generals can get certain buffs based on what you do with them, and based on their predispositions for traits. It's just like how it worked back in Rome Total War or Medieval Total War 2, only with a better UI. Again, a great feature, although I'll have to credit it as being secretly from a previous Total War game that was quietly removed and is now sneaking back in. And it really was sneaking back in because I didn't notice this. It's in the level up menu somehow, and normally you don't see it. I don't remember how I got to this screen, it only happened once, perhaps it was an accident. There's this other de facto skill tree you can level up. Something's going on here. Now here's our family tree, where you can set up dynastic marriages and generally see your dynasty. Hey, that's the name of the game, and yet this feature remained hidden to me until the end. In fact, no characters ever died in this campaign. So our family tree is just flat horizontally. We're still stuck with our starting cast. But yes, it's another feature from older Total Wars that was ranted about back in the day, so it's good to see it's coming back, by popular demand. It just doesn't really matter, like all of the other stuff that's back by popular demand, really. I was thinking that so much of what people were desperately requesting in the Rome 2 and Attila days, when I was looking at the community and wondering what people were requesting, actually is in Total War Pharaoh Dynasties. It just doesn't matter, it didn't work. It's too late. Nobody saw it. I don't know what's going on here. It doesn't work altogether. You had to sort of change everything else to fit all of the features people wanted in. As I was saying ages ago, you have to make the game about these new features. You have to focus on things. So if the game is called Dynasties, then you have this family tree feature, and this is a core part of the game. Your goal is to advance your dynasty on this screen. The game is about this. We're immediately inventing paradox games again, aren't we? I'm just looking for some kind of mechanical integration where I think I'll take this place in particular, do this in-game action in particular, because it advances the Dynasties mechanic. I'm doing it for a separate layer of reason in the game, thanks to this new mechanic. Whatever that mechanic might be. It's probably always going to sit there clashing with just taking settlements, because that's so ingrained at the core of the game. You can't really add anything to add new gameplay, because like if you took that taking settlements core away, you'd have to rework everything. And I guess what I'm suggesting is, yes, please do rework everything. But I guess I'm also trying to desperately find like a really easy solution. Something where you just like layer some new mechanic on top of everything and now it all works all of a sudden. There simply might not be one here, because you just can't salvage all of the bells and whistles because they're all just tangential to the main game. You have to change the main game, probably overhaul everything, and it's all just going to fall apart like game design wise. We have to start again. What do I even mean by all of this? There's not enough time in the universe to explain. Here's what I mean. Put a pinball minigame in the family tree screen so that I'll say it's more of a game. Boom, next please. There's also this extensive list of titles and achievements where the game seems to be tracking all of the things your Dynasty members do. More indications of a possible game emerging out there, I don't know. It's better than anything this series has done in this respect. Like, this is good, I guess. But it's also A, like, pretty hidden, and B, not actually part of the game, as prior rants. And the way it all looks like colourful blocks also makes me think it's ideal for adding a breakout minigame. Every screen in this game that's like 3 degrees separated from what you actually do in the main gameplay loop, which is pretty much all of them, should have another game installed into it to make up for that. Remember that lore-making system I refuse to use? Make it a Phoenix Wright-style text adventure game. I mean, that's literally what Paradox would have done in this situation, I guess. I should go work for them. This game has it all. It really does. It's got like everything everybody was asking for. But it's overflowing with these mechanics. Everything's doing each other's jobs, everything overlaps, it's a big glorious mess of just passive buffs you don't need. And while I'm saying like it's got everything, there's one kind of thing it's missing, which is like a game in the middle, like something good to be doing with all of this stuff, something for it all to connect into. You'll note that what I talked about in this commentary, it hasn't really been about like strategic options, about units, about armies and like war stuff, other than to note that it's happening in the background. Because it's only like 5% of the gameplay at this stage. You're mainly reading building tooltips and using 7 different campaign mechanics every turn. And you're trying to get some loser AI faction to give you all their stone so you can upgrade your stuff and they can't, so you can kill them later for free, like without having to actually do a battle. I don't know, I just bullied everyone throughout this campaign, and then at the meta level, I'm bullying the campaign itself. I still thought it was good. Again, I have to like point that out. Like, I kind of liked it. The production value of this copy-pasted, overloaded, weak-willed and empty strategy game is so high that it's still worth a play if you like just sort of kind of 4x-ish number goes up simulators. Like, it just feels like playing Civilization or something like that. It is a far cry, though, from when Total War was special, and the business realities, I guess, of this franchise being wholly owned by a massive company, CA, under the thumb of an even bigger company, Sega, probably mean that they're not going to take the huge risk of trying to make a new game that isn't from the Total War formula, but would perhaps capture the spirit of Total War, that being just an immersive battle simulator with a campaign side to give it all context and allow you to progress your goals through fighting in some sort of cool way. I mean, it's kind of that already, isn't it? And yes, as I said before, when I was younger, like 10 years ago even, you'd look at Total War and you'd think, well, just imagine what they're going to do with this in the next 10 years, like based on how much progress and how much new stuff they invented over the previous 10 years. But it's the same. 10 years later, the graphics are better, but I'm still just getting 120 slingers to shoot white lines into some guides who don't really react to getting hit if you actually look at it. And you can't really look at it if you're playing the game anyway. One imagines, like, a seamless open world where you actually zoom from the campaign view to the army view, and there are 40,000 soldiers standing there. Like, it's 35% of your whole population, and you're absolutely boned if you lose them. You better strategize this battle like the entire game depends on it, because it does. You know, some kind of heavy-hitting thing, which spiritually was what even the cartoonish Rome Total War was, because it was being compared then to things like Age of Empires, which is even more cartoonish and like unepic. So we need whatever the equivalent of that Switch is today, where this game we're looking at now is the lame cartoonish one, and then CA comes out with the new, like, big, hardcore, big-brained armchair general game that's also really cool and cinematic and just sort of like cool explosions, brain-rotty type thing, and other high-quality descriptions. I did come up with an actual compromise to suggest at the end here. We're going to take that idea that I was floating about earlier, where cities bend to your influence without you having to fight them or something. And we're going to basically bring that closer to how Total War already works, by saying it's going to be Total War, but with the Hearts of Iron map system. I think that's a simple enough but complex enough step to make a new game out of Total War. So I'm talking about the borders between factions being defined by where armies most recently moved, and diplomatic agreements being needed to make permanent borders. And every region would be subdivided into like 6 sub-regions to facilitate this, or something, which can all be independently lost, such that the specifics of positioning matter, and the whole map matters essentially. We're bringing the map back into the game. You can lose populations outside of your cities, and that matters, and there'll just be a whole load of new consideration that will bring a new perspective to how you play, without really having to change the game that much. A lot of what's already there could still be used. I think that latter point is key because CA has shown they're not really going to innovate far from where they were in the previous game. So yes, I'll put that forward as my suggestion that kind of keeps everything the same but has one big change that might, as a result, knock on and change the feel of everything else and just make everything seem good in some way. Maybe stealing Hearts of Iron 4's ideas is just an easy to grasp solution that will lead in that direction and give you that one standout difference that revives the genre. A real suggestion for once there: Total War, Pharaoh, Dynasties, Front Lines. 4 titles, no mercy. Probably don't set it in the Bronze Age, like that's my actual super real suggestion. It was kind of like people were begging CA to make a historical Total War after the Warhammer stuff and Total War Troy's like light fantasy approach. And they were just like, okay, here's Total War Troy, but it's historical I guess, but not really. And everyone's like, well, we meant like Empire Total War 2, or Medieval 3, or do something like Total War Chinggis, that you take over the world of the Mongols. Like, this is the kind of direction that's being tactically ignored, probably to avoid having to work on new code and to avoid risk, essentially. Well, again, I crawl on the floor, like I'm lost in the desert, just about raising my hand to suggest they do quote-unquote something, and then I collapse at last. Can you revive this old Total War loser's faith in a historic war game being really interesting again? Maybe I'm just too old for this now, because I'm like, Stardew Valley is pretty good. While Conquering Mesopotamia is like, well, it was okay, but only because it played relaxing music, and I mean that unironically. Yes, I'm not really the person CA wants to impress right now, most likely, so my opinion is worthless to them. Well, there were some opinions anyway. I think what we're going to have to do here is employ my new favourite gamer cope. We sit back and we wait for a Chinese company to steal everything, and maybe they'll make it better through the magic of ignoring intellectual property and probably just injecting anime waifus into it as well. Like, would Total War Pharaoh be better if the king of the universe was Tsundere? It's not like I conquered the Euphrates to impress you or anything. Okay, another perfect idea. And then, yeah, maybe we can get the magic to return, or at least get some competition to be drummed up, so that CA will kind of have to do something cool in like 10 years. There's the dream. Well, I guess I liked this one, didn't I? I liked Three Kingdoms as well, but I absolutely loved like Rome 1 and Empire and Shogun 2 in those days. And now when I think of strategy games, I guess I think of like Hearts of Iron 4, or literally Magic the Gathering as name dropped in part 1, or even like XCOM. That's what I feel drawn to for decision-making based experiences. I'm mad at what who even knows, but that was my complete campaign commentary as Babylon in Total War Pharaoh Dynasties. I've got a couple of games recorded for my next commentary, probably going to head first into space for another repeat commentary because I managed to get Distant Worlds 2 to actually work this time, and I've finally got a real full playthrough to make a complete commentary on, and I'd like to do that. So we'll see what we can make of all that. Thanks for watching. Play Total War Pharaoh Dynasties. It's the best Total War game of all time, especially if you don't like Total War. And that might actually be what their producer or director level design thoughts were, because like Total War old heads, they're a nerdy bunch of losers anyway, I can assure you of that. Why try to appeal to that small market? Just make a game for people that don't like Total War, because that's most people. Like, that makes sense from a marketing perspective. We didn't get the Total War games we wanted, we got the Total War games we deserved, and we'll just have to cope with that. Well, I've been some guy, king of the universe, giving you gaming opinions, blessed by the entire Great Council of all the gods. Turns out the Great Council of all the gods mainly talks about video games. The point is, everything I said is infallible, as usual, and let's see what wisdom the Great Council of all the gods will send me in my next stream and my next game.